iItaly goes to Washington, D.C. for an exclusive interview with Anthony Stephen Tony Fauci, scientist and head of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, an immunologist who has made substantial contributions to HIV/AIDS research and other immune deficiencies. This interview is part of Italian Leadership in America, a series co-produced by iItaly and the National Italian American Foundation.
Dr. Fauci, thank you for coming tonight to our series of interviews. We are going to go a little deeper into your Italian-American background. And our first question would be about your Italian ancestors. Where did they come from in Italy and why?
Well, my grandparents on both my mother and father's side were born in Italy. My mother and father were born in the United States. My grandfather on my father's side, my paternal grandfather, came from Sciacca in Sicily, as did my paternal grandmother. On my mother's side, my maternal grandmother and grandfather were from Naples, and they came at around the same time. My grandfather on my mother's side was an artist, and I think they didn't talk about it much, but I think there were some political issues that he wanted to leave because he felt that he was being repressed for some reason or other. My grandmother on my mother's side came, I think, for the same reason as most people came, for the opportunity in the United States.
It is rather unusual, a painter, an artist.
Well, what he did, he was a combination commercial artist and an artist who used to paint portraits. So I think he made most of his money by painting graphics for advertisement. But I think he did that kind of graphic artistry to make a living, and he did portrait painting because that's what he really liked to do.
What did the other grandparents did for that?
My grandmother on my mother's side was a homemaker. She was a housewife. She raised the children. My grandfather on my father's side was an accountant.
And did they speak Italian at home with you?
Well, it's very interesting because from the time I was born till the time I went to elementary school, my grandparents both would speak Italian in front of me, and I assimilated Italian and understood what they said. I didn't speak it very well, but as soon as I went to elementary school, they stopped speaking Italian to me because I think they wanted me to make sure that I was English and learned English and spoke English. So I have deep down in my brain a seed of understanding Italian, but only for the years of my first 5 years. And then from then on, they would speak to me in broken English. I don't ever remember my mother and father speaking Italian to me.
The family was first in Manhattan.
Right.
May I assume Lower East Side?
Yeah. Both sides of the family, my father and mother's grandparents, my grandparents, came over, landed in Ellis Island, the way most Italians who come to New York, then came and settled in the Lower East Side of Manhattan in a section referred to as Little Italy. That was where they lived for a few years, right around Grand Street and Mott Street and Mulberry and Elizabeth Street and those areas down there on the Lower East Side. Both sides of the family lived there. When they were there for a few years, and my mother and father were both born in the east side of Manhattan, but after a few years, both families moved to the Bensonhurst section of Brooklyn, which is where I was born.
So you were born and raised in Bensonhurst?
That is correct.
A very Italian neighborhood, I would say. Still
Almost
today,
completely
I'd say.
Italian.
Almost completely Italian. So even if you didn't speak Italian with your family, then I would assume that you had many Italian friends.
So the way the neighborhood was arranged is that most of the children in the neighborhood were second generation Italian. So all of my childhood friends, they all spoke English. Some of their parents were born in the United States, but there were several of them whose parents were actually born in Italy. But all of them spoke English. The people who were bilingual were the parents. All of the parents spoke Italian. The atmosphere of growing up in that neighborhood was very much steeped in Italian-American culture, and it was centered around family, close loyalties to family, close loyalties to friends, and the traditions, particularly around holidays and meals, was very much, I believe, what went on in Italy decades and decades and decades before, whether that was a big dinner on Sunday afternoon or a Christmas Eve dinner that went into the next day for Christmas Day, all things that were very traditional. In fact, we did it in our home, but all of my friends were doing the same thing.
Did your grandparents or parents go back to Italy then?
No, they did not. It's very interesting that my grandparents never returned to Italy. And my mother and father did not go back to Italy. My mother died before she was able to go back to Italy. My father went back to Italy when my sister took him back to Sicily, to Sciacca, when he was 75 years old.
And what was Italy for you? Do you remember what did it mean for you?
When I was a child, Italy as a nation didn't mean a lot to me, except that I was totally aware that was where my roots were from. There was no doubt that my lineage, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, my great-great-grandparents all came from Italy. So there was a certain awareness that there was a strong link and pride to be Italian. So there was a very positive feeling towards the country of Italy, even though we didn't go back as children. Right.
And do you remember any tensions or frictions with other ethnic groups?
No.
The Irish, for example?
No, not at all. In fact, it was very interesting because it is not that way right now. But back when I was born and in the 1940s to 50s and 50s to the mid-50s, there were very strict boundaries of neighborhoods. So, Bensonhurst went to a certain point, and then as soon as you crossed the street, you were in the Jewish neighborhood. And then when I went to high school, that was my first very important experience with mixing ethnic groups. I had, if you look at my elementary school, I went to an elementary school called Our Lady of Guadalupe, and there were maybe 60 kids in the class. I would say 52 of them were Italian American, and 8 of them were either Irish or German or Swedish. So we had a little inkling of cross-culture understanding, but it was when I went to high school that I was very clear that we had a lot of different cultures and ethnic groups, and that was the first full daily experience that I had with interacting with other people.
And how was this interaction? There were names called, there were prejudices or anything that you suffered or noticed?
I did not at all. I mean, to my memory, there was virtually none.
And then at a certain point later in life, you married a non-Italian
Correct.
girl, right? The Dr. Christine Grady.
Yeah.
And was that any difficult for your family to accept, or for her family to accept an Italian in her family?
Not at all. Zero. No, I mean, my family immediately fell in love with the woman that I was going to marry. She's a lovely woman that my family absolutely adored her. As soon as they met her, they thought she was fantastic. And also same way with my wife's family. They're very open and embracing of me.
So let's go for a moment back to Bensonhurst when you were younger and your father was a pharmacist.
Right.
And I imagine that there must be some sort of relationship between your father's job and your future career, even if we don't know at this moment that there is.
Well, it's probably some subconscious direction of my going into a field that helps people who are sick.
Did you help your father as a boy in the shop?
Oh yeah, I helped my father in two ways. One, I would help wait on customers when they would come in, but more importantly, on weekends and on after school, I would deliver prescriptions.
When was it that you developed a real passion for being a physician, and then you enrolled in Cornell Medical School?
Right.
So when did this happen?
Well, I decided I wanted to become a physician maybe halfway through high school. I had kind of a pleasant conflict in that I liked the humanities. I liked Latin, Greek, the Romance languages, French, ancient history, philosophy. I liked that very much because I was very interested in people and the humanities. I also liked science, chemistry. So the tension between the sciences and the classics and the humanities, it seemed to me that the natural way to mix them together would to be a physician, where you could deal with people all the time, but you were dealing with them in a scientific way, trying to figure out the diseases and to do something for the disease, to cure, to work on that. So I believe that being a physician was the most natural profession for me and the dual things that I liked.
So you went to Cornell Medical School, and then at that point you could still be a physician, curing people, actually, practically speaking, or a researcher. And at some point there must have been a decision there, right? To be one or the other, because then you lean towards research.
Well, that's a good question, because there was a decision, and instead of deciding to be one or the other, I decided I would be both. And that's the decision I made. So when I graduated medical school and I did all of my post-medical school training as a young physician, I went down to the National Institutes of Health to study infectious diseases and immunology in a fellowship. As part of that fellowship training, I had to do research. And I found out, much to my surprise, that I liked research very much and I was really quite good at it. So even though I went down there with the intention of coming back to New York City and practicing medicine at the New York Hospital Cornell Medical Center in New York City, that was my goal, was to train for 3 years in the NIH in Bethesda, Maryland, and then to ultimately go back and practice medicine. And then when I found out that I had an aptitude and a liking for research, I was left with what I thought would be a conflict. And then I decided that I would try to do both. I still see patients all the time. I take care of patients. And I run a big scientific laboratory that's asking important scientific questions. So I never had to make the choice of either or. I decided that I would give it a shot and see if I could do both, and I did. And that was how it turned out the way I am right now.
And where was it when you entered the National Institute of Health?
I came down as a fellow in training in 1968 to 71. Then I went back to the New York Hospital to do extra clinical training with patients from 1971 to 1972. And I've been down here at the National Institutes of Health ever since, so from 1972 until now. So I've been doing that now for, quite a long time.
Quite a long time. But it took you not long time to become the director, right? Like 10 years,
Right.
12 years, whatever.
Yeah.
That's a real brilliant career.
Well, I liked what I was doing, and fortunately I was pretty good at it. So I wanted to have a broader impact on the world of infectious diseases. And when you do research and you see patients, you can have an impact, but it usually is in a somewhat restricted way. You don't have broad influence on the field. And I thought if I became the director of the Institute, I would have a broader impact on the field of infectious diseases and immunology. And that was the reason why I took the job.
Your name is obviously related, though it is far from being the only thing you have done or you're doing, but it's obviously related to the HIV and the scientific discoveries that you did. Would you say in a few words what has been your role and the role of your institute in this, globally speaking?
Yeah, no, globally speaking, so I've had the opportunity not only to help to understand the very fundamental basics of the nature of HIV, but my institute, under my leadership, has been responsible for developing the therapies that have transformed HIV disease from a universally fatal disease. When I first started working on HIV, when people came in with AIDS, their life expectancy would be measured in a year to 2 at the most, and they would be dead in a year or 2. With the drugs that we developed under my leadership, we now have about 30 drugs that if someone's HIV infected and you gave them this combination of 3 drugs and they took their medicines, you could predict that they could live, if they started taking it when they were 25 years old, that they would live an additional 50 years, 50, which means almost a normal lifespan. So many people consider that one of the most important advances in medicine in many, many, many years, that you've taken a disease that was formerly almost universally fatal, and by the development of very effective therapies, that you've actually transformed into a manageable disease. That is probably the most important scientific contribution that I made. The most important policy contribution that I made is that back in 2002, President George W. Bush asked me to go to Africa on his behalf and determine if the United States could put together a program that might transform the terrible situation with HIV/AIDS in Southern Africa. So he asked me to go there, and I went there, and I put together a program after many months working on it, put together a program that I proposed that would provide aid in the form of drugs, prevention, and care for HIV-infected people in Southern Africa, both men, women, and children. And that program is called the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, or PEPFAR. So today, 14 years later, 13 years later, this is now being recognized as the most important global health program that has ever been put together in history, in that it is responsible for saving several millions of lives, about 7 to 9 million lives. So that's one thing that I feel as proud of from a policy standpoint as the individual research that I did in helping to develop the drugs to treat patients.
You don't seem to be a person who has much time to do anything else in life, but I imagine you find time for your family and also time for your hobbies.
Well, running is probably my only real hobby, in addition to trying to spend as much time as I can with my wife and children. My children are grown up now, so they're out of the house, but when they were in school, I would like to go to their sporting events. They were all very good athletes, my children, but my own personal hobby is running. And I've been doing that now for, more than 30 years. I've run marathons, I've run 10K races, and I love it very much. It's good for you, it makes you feel good, it keeps you in good shape. That's what I like most of all, is running.
You told me before that you have trained young Italian scientists also
Yes.
in your lab.
Yes. Yeah, mostly because of the nature of my work, but also because I am Italian American. Many very bright, young Italian scientists, usually early on in their training period, came over to my lab to spend 3, 4, 5, 6 years, 7 years sometimes, training in my lab, and then go back to Italy. And right now in Italy, there are several scientists who are quite accomplished and quite senior, who in the early years of their training trained in my lab when they were much younger. So there are many institutions in Italy that have people that were trained in the FAUCI laboratory, in Milano, in Genoa, in Rome, in Bari, Naples. This is a photo of the wedding picture of my mother and father when they were married in Brooklyn, New York. Interestingly, they both were 18 years old. They got married as soon as they graduated from high school. They went to NIAID High School in Brooklyn, and they fell in love when they were high school students, and as soon as they graduated, they got married. And then my father went to Columbia University, and my mother went to Hunter College, but they were married. So this is a picture of them on their wedding day. To contrast with that, here's a picture of my Irish-American wife and I on our wedding day, many, many, many years later, which was great. I've been married now to my wife for 32 years, and it's wonderful. This next one is a picture of me in a little stroller when I was about 1 or 2 years old, where my mother was pushing me along the street in Bensonhurst on 16th Avenue and 86th Street, because she used to take me out for walks in the beautiful environment of Brooklyn then, which still is, but was then a very beautiful place. This next picture is a picture of me playing basketball with my basketball team in high school. I was the captain of my basketball team at Regis High School, and I used to love sports very much. I was very much athletically inclined, and this is a picture of me playing with my team in basketball. And this final picture is a picture of me at a young age when I was entering into medical school. I had just finished college, and I was just starting on my career as a physician.
We always end our conversations by asking our guests, what's your favorite dish? Favorite Italian dish?
My favorite Italian dish is a pasta, and that is a penne with a very nice Genoese pesto.
And do you have a favorite Italian song?
Well, I wouldn't say an Italian song, but a certain component from an opera, No se dorma, from that the great opera. So I like Italian opera. I mean, much more than I like any other kind of music. I don't have time to go to the opera very frequently, but I think that some of the Italian operas are just absolutely beautiful.
Principessa nella tua fredda